because we seek to know you. We seek to know the will you have for each and every one of our lives. We seek to, dear Lord, to know what you would have us to know about your love, about your mercy, and about your grace. But more than just knowing it, dear God, we seek to be a people who can feel deeply the love, the grace, and the mercy that you have for each and every one of us. So be with us now at this time as we seek to probe the depth of your grace and the depths of your mercy. It's in Jesus' name and for his sake we all pray. Amen. Before I say anything, does anybody have in the room or out there in Zoom land, I gotta find a better way to say that. Or does anybody have anything in the room, that they want to say right now, or anything? Well, thank you.
Okay, what they're saying is welcome to Pastor Phil.
Okay.
So I will be repeating whatever you guys say so that they can hear at home. And I also will be repeating whatever comes on comments on Zoom. So please chat on Zoom and we will hopefully have better communication about what people are saying online.
Okay, all right, okay. And one of the things I want to put a real heavy emphasis on that really doesn't directly have anything to do with, the topic, but I really want to encourage this church family to engage its own voice, to engage its own voice. I think I mentioned a while ago, an educator by the name of Paulo Freire, and he was a Brazilian educator, and he spent his time, or some of his time, talking about education that was dialogical in nature. In other words, it was not language that came from the top down. It was language and conversation and dialogue, and dialogue that was, a conversation among peers. So yes, you guys have chosen me to be the stated supply pastor, and implied in that is a degree of, some measure of leadership that's implied in that. But don't get hung up on that. It's like, we are on this journey together. We are on this journey together. So the extent to which, things are sitting around, you want to talk about them. Make your points known, make your points known. Now, it might create for, a level and degree of kind of chaos, if you will, that we haven't experienced before. But go have a piece of chocolate cake after that. So again, it's kind of like, if you have anything you want to say it. Now this is, I know this is not, you won't find that in the management books. That you might find, talk of, a flat organization structure, and I'm just kind of, another piece of that flatness. But again, I'm reaching out and I'm encouraging everyone to kind of, to find their voice. But principally, it's a voice for how we understand Jesus the Christ. That's what, that's our conversation now. How do we understand Jesus the Christ, and, how are we going to share that with the community that's around us? So that's what I, so now have you had enough time to come up with something? Or if not, I'll just plunge into this. Okay, thank you, Bob.
I was reading a book, not the book of grace, but another book, and he described grace, the author described grace as being unlimited. And that thought has been going through my mind all week. You can't measure it. We've been thrown a lot of things this year, but it's nowhere, doesn't even approach the size of God's grace.
What, the last sentence, because you're going to repeat that.
So Bob Smith is saying that he read another book that is not the grace book, but that it was talking about how God's grace is unlimited. And so Bob was reflecting about all the issues that we've had, but God's grace being unlimited can overcome all that, or maybe tops that.
Yeah, yeah. And just maybe, what happened or what has happened, actually God's grace at work. Now that's going to be a stretch, but as I kind of begin to consider how to kind of walk us through these days ahead and kind of put ourselves back together, um, there's a, like I said, I think last week, there are no problems, only opportunities. So this is an opportunity for us to grow and discover things in ways in which we just simply haven't had to grow. You know, I'm, you know, I mean, you haven't had to have a guy come by who can say to you, my big challenge is getting down 104 without getting pulled over by the police. It's so maybe there's opportunities here, and I'm not just simply along those lines, but in many different ways, there's opportunity. But does anybody else have anything to say, or I'm going to start? I have some. Oh, okay.
I have a question. I've been a member of this church for 40 some years. Can we have some background on you? I'd like to know more about you.
More about me.
Yeah.
So Karen Hunt is asking that she's been a church member for 40 some years, and she's asking if she could have more background on Pastor Phil.
Let's see. Is this the time to do that? Bob says, sure, why not? Okay. Well, I am the third child of Lloyd and Olive Davis. My parents are natives of a town called Alton, Illinois, which was a riverfront town. Actually, it's kind of like a bedroom community to St. Louis, but it's on the east side of the Mississippi River. Um, the you know my I asked my father one day, so how'd you end up in New York City? And first he said, well, I didn't want to get bossed around in Alton by his mother-in-law. I, I knew her as Granny. Granny was quite sweet to me. Um, yeah, okay, but what he said, and you're asking about me, but I'm kind of probably filling in a whole lot more than you're asking for. What he said to me in the conversation was Alton at the time was a prosperous riverfront town where everybody, black or white, did well. But what he said to me was, yeah, all the jobs paid well, the black people just got the worst jobs. So I mean, everybody was comfortable. As a matter of fact, um, his father worked in a foundry where a lot of people ended up as a consequence of it having like lung diseases and kind of dying or prematurely. But anyway, so they actually moved from Illinois to Syracuse, and he was working for General Electric, doing exactly what, I don't know. So why'd you leave Syracuse? He said, well, the union had gone out on strike, and he could see that it was going. He said it was a long, violent strike. He said he didn't see himself out there turning cars over. So they ended up down in New York City, and at that point they had my older brother and older sister. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. My first address was 213 Marion Street. And if you hear stories about gentrification, 213 Marion Street has been gentrified. I couldn't afford to live there now. But anyway, I was born in Brooklyn. I went to PS 20, Public School 21 in Brooklyn for a while. Then, ultimately I spent most of my like young years in the northeast section of the Bronx. I went to Evander Childs High School. I played football, which I refused to let my children consider. No, I'm just serious. It's like, and I actually think I'm already starting to reckon with, multiple concussions that I had as a high school athlete. Now, one of the things that, you're asking about me, I'm also kind of probably sharing some other stuff. Um, I was one of those kids who was born late in the year and also skipped a grade. So I was entering college at 16, which I would recommend for no one, you know, for no one. I mean, it's because, because you're at, I was, spent most of my life most of my young life out of my element with people who were, much more mature than I was, and just at a different state, developmentally. So, but anyway, I started college with 16 and then spent, I don't know, I think I've spent 7 years getting my undergraduate degree. Um, Went to work in the information technology industry. Worked at a bunch of blue chip companies, and then I had a job at one of those blue chip companies, and I just simply said, and this is before I knew anything about quote unquote working the system. I just simply said one day, I'm not letting people treat me like this. To myself and another fellow by the name of Bob Baronello. We had been transferred into the banking division. And, I had a customer, I wasn't in sales, but I had a customer facing job. And it ended up working for somebody that was just horrendous, just horrendous. But I actually think that kind of opened the door for me to begin to kind of consider ministry, as an option. That actually, it's hard to explain that. It's really kind of difficult to explain that. But what I do recall about leaving that job was it was the first time in my life that I was not being, or thinking that my life was supposed to go down this pre-planned path. I'm not going to say I was off the grid, but it was the first time in my life that, I wasn't on this pre-planned path. And, leaving a lot of steps out. I remember being in church one day thinking to myself, these people need help. And that's kind of how and it was a large, at the time anyway, it was a large, very stodgy, traditional Black Baptist church. Um, Not unlike large, stodgy, traditional white Presbyterian churches. All right, but I'm sitting there one day, and I said, okay, something needs to happen here, because and essentially, I'm probably saying a whole lot more, but essentially, the observation I had come to was, and was that people had bought into patterns of living and thinking about the world, and we're kind of stuck, just kind of stuck. And it's kind of like we need to kind of, free ourselves from these things. I mean, I will not quote for you the line from, if I said George Clinton, does that mean anything to the room? If I said Parliament Funkadelic, would that mean? Anyway, I'm not going to say they were in league with Bob Dylan. No, they were not in league with Bob Dylan. But, they wrote, the kind of creative and thought-provoking songs. And it was very fun music. It was very fun music. I went to a number of their concerts. Talking about George Clinton at church. I went to a number of their concerts, and it was like grand theater. It was, better than any opera, one might imagine, or at least in league. Those performances were at least in league with some of these major. But anyway, my cultural milieu, if you will, included those kind of artists, which, made you think about what's going on around you, but anyway, so I ended up, in divinity school, and I slowly worked my way through through divinity school. graduated, I think it was, I forget what year it was at this point. But graduated while in school, met my former spouse, the mother of my children. And the way I end up in Rochester is, she was earning a PhD in New Testament studies, and for a while was a tenured faculty at the divinity school until she got an offer to work as an associate dean at the Howard Divinity School and to be on their faculty. Um, and and I got left with well, it was a little more complicated than that, but with her move, the boys didn't want to go, so I spent a bunch of years, being not the soccer dad, but the track, the swimming, and the rugby dad. Driving all over the place, and I refuse to wait to fight with them on Sunday mornings to get them here. Just kind of like, we've had our battles, um, but ended up, here we are. And what happened, how I got involved with you Presbyterians is my former spouse was or is a Presbyterian. And she had a conversation. I don't know if anybody remembers the former executive presbyter, Edie Gauss. And I don't know if, all right, she goes back to, I want to say 99, 2000. She was the executive presbyter here. And they had a conversation at the time, the information technology job I had was sent to India. So I'm like, what am I going to do now? And my name came up in this conversation. And I went to talk to Edie Gauss, and Edie Gauss said, well, we got this church over here in East Rochester, and somehow or the other, I passed muster with Presbyterians back in, I guess it was 2000, and I want to 2003. I think it was 2003. And so that was my journey with, so that was the journey. That's how I got to Presbyterian world. Is that enough?
Yeah, how many children do you have?
What's that?
How many children do you have?
I have two boys. I'm proud of my boys. One's enrolled at the University of Pennsylvania, and the other one's enrolled at Howard University. So but again, as with all things, anybody with kids know this could change any minute. So I'm reserving judgment on the outcome there. I just started. Anybody heard of Noom? Okay, Noom is this weight loss app. So wish me luck. But were it not for the fact of this Noom, I probably would have also told you in getting to know me that there's a 4-year-old rye called Templeton that I like, okay? All right? I'm a people too. I'm a people too. But I'm not, but I'm on Noom now, and it's kind of, but anyway. So I'm I'm about as regular you're gonna find among, people who, go about the business of doing this work. Because to be honest with you, I'm not sure who it was I told this to. I think it was Bob was in the room when I said this. There was a point in which when I kind of really came to terms with what ministry really meant, and I was ordained at this point. I had finished school. I was like ready to never mind. Never mind. But here we are. It's like God had a different plan in mind than the one that I have, and I'll just treat this as God's grace. God being graceful. And the so that's enough for now. Okay, okay, that's enough. He, hmm?
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. No questions about aged. Never mind. What I wanted to do, yeah, and see, I don't have a problem divulging what what people would say. Oh, you shouldn't do that. I'm kind of like, wait a minute. We're in the grace business. We're in the grace business. So what I wanted to do, I actually got a plan here. And if you have with you the book, um, and before I even do what I plan to do, I just need to go back to what's in on the acknowledgments page, that first line, because it's just the way it opens. It says, "Grace is God's best idea. His decision to ravage a people by love, to rescue passionately, and to restore justly. What rivals it? Of all his wondrous works, grace, in my estimation, is the magnum opus." I mean, I just kind of love that. But if you turn the page, or in my book, it's page 15. I just want to share with you, some of the things that are noted there. Some quotes there. The first one: "We will be confident when we stand before the Lord, even if our hearts condemn us. For God is greater than our hearts, and God knows everything." Even if our hearts condemn us. So if you stole the cookie from the cookie jar and that's weighing heavily on you, God's okay with you. God's okay with you. Um, Let me, go on, to the next one. "Let us come near to God with a sincere heart and a sure faith, because we have been made free from a guilty conscience." Free from a guilty conscience. Uh, yeah. Now, I will say that if you look through, I can't place it right now. But in one of the words of the institution, the preparation for communion, which I don't use, there's a line about let a person examine themselves, and there's this notion of unworthily taking communion. This runs in the opposite direction from that. Let us come near to. Does it? You know what I'm talking about? There's a passage in the Bible that, if anyone, drinks this cup unworthily, they drink damnation unto themselves. Okay, in terms of like getting to know me, I don't do that kind of theology, okay? I'm just, And one of the things that, my teacher, James Cone, taught all of us, that, we are free to do theology. Now, that doesn't mean be reckless and have a theology that goes and prays for a war that's about to start. That's kind of reckless. That's kind of to have a theology that sanctions nations. That's kind of reckless. That's kind of reckless. But for reasons which I mean, all of these things, and eventually we'll kind of, or maybe we'll peel all of these things back. But there's a reason why churches and church leadership get away with leading people down particular paths. There's a reason. Like, does anybody know? Everybody here familiar with the Southern Baptists? Anybody know why the Southern Baptists became a denomination? The Southern Baptists became a denomination as a pro-slavery denomination. If you want my opinion, that's a pretty reckless doing of theology. In fact, it's a theology that's tied to the broader ideology of people making money. It's some time ago. Well, actually, it's in the Bible. It's like the love of money, the root of all evil. So you had these slave owners who were more in love with money than they were with humanity. Yeah, and So, but, we can, we're all free to, to identify for ourselves a way of talking about God that is loving. And and to my mind, that's all it ever needs to be. If you have a God that needs to do something besides love, I really don't have much use for that God. Now some of, and there are people who do, that's the amazing thing. And it's kind of, at one point while I was in divinity school, I had considered um, pursuing a PhD in the sociology of religion, but I chose not to. I chose not to. But when you kind of begin to peel the covers back on that, lots and lots of stuff begins to get revealed to you. You begin to develop an understanding. And to my surprise, Vincent Winbush, who at the time was the top dog in New Testament studies, was willing to write me a recommendation. But I just kind of I said, nah. I saw what the other PhD candidates were going through, and I said, I'm not that guy. Because they were working these people over the coals. They were just working them over the coals. But anyway, so I don't do that drinks damnation unto themselves kind of theology. Now there certainly is, actually there's a lot. There were people who will take you through some theological hoops, if you will. Sort of like the same kind of logic that created the geocentric view of the universe, that view of the universe that had the earth at its center. People came up with science to justify that. People came up with science to justify that. So in a like manner, people come up with kind of, theological discourse that justifies, all kinds of mean things. It's, if you want to know what holy living is, love the Lord your God, your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So anyway, I'm trying to get through page 15, which has only 4 little sentences on it. The next one is, from Augustine, how great a God is he who gives God. And then finally, I don't know who John Stott is, but grace is God loving, God stooping, God coming to the rescue, God giving himself generously in and through Jesus Christ. And I'm just, there are few kind of, Christian writers, and I, kind of distinguish, there's the academic folks, and then there's folks like Lucado. There are few people who put together a stream of consciousness and understanding of our faith and the love that's in our faith than Max Lucado does. I mean, I have, some other books of his, but he just, just does a fabulous job and stuff. And so I'll turn your attention, if you just look at page 16, you know, look at this. In the presence of God, in defiance of Satan, Jesus Christ rises to your defense. In defiance of anything that might try to put you down, even the fact that you stole the cookie from the cookie jar. In defiance of all of that, God's ready to stand up for you. God is ready to stand up for you. Now, one of the things I need to be kind of careful about, and I learned this kind of the hard way, or I just had to learn it the way I learned it, is don't confuse being gracious with enabling bad behavior. Sometimes, sometimes we want to say, well, that's just their personality. Last week, I came across a statement that said, in a person, trauma decontextualized, trauma taken out of context, is called personality. But in fact, you're often looking at the behavior of a traumatized person, but you don't have the context within which to go, oh, this person has some challenges. And I'm not going to enable the behavior, and I'm going to try to work with this person. And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but try to work with this person in order to, to help them get their trauma in context. And it's, and to be frank with you, those kind of things for us as people can be terrifying. You know, lots and lots of folks have stories they just simply don't want to tell. They just simply don't want to tell those stories. But in the presence of God, in defiance of Satan, Jesus Christ rises to your defense. That's God's grace at work. That's God saying, don't worry about your story. I am deeply in love with you. That's everybody. Yeah. And that's the thing that kind of blows me away, that there is a God that just kind of wants to hold me and say, hey, everything's okay. You don't have to worry about that. I got you, and I'm going to carry you lovingly through all of eternity. So yeah, that's what's on page 16. And I'm talking too much. Again, I'm going to say it until, actually, I'm going to feel like we have had some success together when everybody gets a voice. When everybody gets a voice and everybody goes, oh, I get it. I can't wait to tell you about how much God loves us. So let's kind of, keep it in mind. One of the things that I'll say it as plainly as I can, and I found myself over the years, sharing this, with loved ones. It was simply the word, you're safe with me. And I'm not kind of like, I'm putting that out in the context of we are safe with God. Even if the most eloquent speaker is standing over there, you have something to say that may need to be heard. You have something to say that may need to be heard. So let's get off of page 16. Could somebody do me a favor? Since Connie has the microphone, I'm going to ask Connie if she's not, to read for us. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go get some water. But I want you to read from starting on page 17 to well into page 19 to I'll show you where. Thank you. On page 19, right, up to here.
Okay.
All righty. Yeah, so if you would, thank you. I didn't thank you. Thanks, Bob.
The voices yanked her out of bed. Get up, you harlot. What kind of woman do you think you are? Priest slammed open the bedroom door, threw back the window curtains, and pulled off the covers. Before she felt the warmth of the morning sun, she felt the heat of their scorn. Shame on you, pathetic, disgusting. She scarcely had time to cover her body before they marched her through the narrow streets. Dogs yelped, roosters ran, women leaned out of their windows, mothers snatched children off the path, merchants peered out of the doors of their shops. Jerusalem became a jury and rendered its verdict with glares and crossed arms. And if the bedroom raid and parade of shame were inadequate, the men thrust her into the middle of the morning Bible class. Early the next morning, Jesus was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and Pharisees brought the woman they had caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? Stunned students stood on one side of her pious plaintiffs on the other. They had their questions. And convictions. She had her dangling negligee and smeared lipstick. This woman was caught in the very act of adultery, her accusers crowed. Caught in the very act, in the moment, in the arms, in the passion, caught in the very act by Jerusalem Council on Decency and Conduct. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? The woman had no exit. Deny the accusation. She had been caught. Plead for mercy. From whom? From God? His spokesmen were squeezing stones and snarling their lips. No one could speak for her, but someone would stoop for her. Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust. We would expect him to stand up, step forward, or even ascend a stair and speak. But instead, he leaned over. He descended lower than anyone else, beneath the priests, the people, even beneath the woman. The accusers looked down on her. To see Jesus, they had to look down even farther. He's prone to stoop. He stooped to wash feet, to embrace children, stooped to pull Peter out of the sea, to pray in the garden. He stooped before the Roman whipping post, stooped to carry the cross. Grace is a God who stoops. Here he stooped to write in the dust. Remember the first occasion his fingers touched dirt? He scooped soil and formed Adam. As he touched the sun-baked soil beside the woman, Jesus may have been reliving the creation moment, reminding himself from whence he came. Earthly humans are prone to do earthly things. Maybe Jesus wrote in the soil for his own benefit, or for hers, to divert gaping eyes from the scantily clad, just caught woman who stood in the center of the circle. The posse grew impatient with the silent, stooping Jesus. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up. He lifted himself erect until his shoulders were straight and his head was high. He stood not to preach, for his words would be few, not for long, for he would soon stoop again. Not to instruct his followers, he didn't address them. He stood on behalf of the woman. He placed himself between her and the lynch mob and said, all right, stone her, but let those who've never sinned throw the first stones. Then he stooped again and wrote in the dust.
Does anyone have anything they want to say about that?
We have a comment from online asking why the man caught was not taken as well.
Okay, there's a question from online about why was the man not caught and taken in as well?
Well, who was writing the rules? you know, it's like, who's writing the rules? I mean, it's really quite that simple. It's like, you have a history where men wrote the rules. So that's the best answer I can give you. But can everybody see that? It's like, they were writing the rules. It's gonna, it's almost like any situation where justice is not prevailing. I mean, the examples that come out of my tradition is, the issues around, voter suppression. The rules were, they had rules where you had to pay, for an African American to vote, they had to pay a poll tax. For an African American to vote, they had to like read and interpret, these elaborate documents. The rules were written to disenfranchise African Americans. In this case, the tradition, and see, this is where it gets interesting. The tradition of the faith was written in such a way as to, disenfranchise women. So that's, and see, one of the things I'll never forget was the Sunday school department, the youth Sunday school department had this motto, that they would say every Sunday before Sunday school class. And it went something like, the Bible contains the mind of God, the state of man, read it to be wise, believe it to be holy. But the state of humanity, let me kind of change that into the state of humanity. And when you kind of you can see some of these patterns that we see in the Bible getting played out in all kinds of situations, and some of our task is to really be somewhere between spiritually brave enough and intellectually brave enough to call it out when we see it. To call it out when we see it. And if you're worried about getting stoned, God's got this, I love where they say God is a doctor who never lost a patient. So, and also I still struggle with the cross, and I still struggle with bearing the cross. But having the willingness to call stuff out, even in the face of those who are powerful and who have, resources that they can bring to bear. I don't know if anybody, of course you wouldn't. I probably shouldn't have said that. But did anybody hear about the Google, artificial intelligence ethicist who Google just fired? Anyway, right? No, but I kind of laugh at some of the things I've managed to pay attention to. But so it was an Ethiopian, Google's chief artificial intelligence ethicist was fired. Okay, so Bob knows about this. And the reason, it's convoluted. They're saying, Google has one side of the story. She and her colleagues have another side of the story. But they fired her because she pointed out publicly two very significant things. One was how artificial intelligence fails to adequately identify people of color, with like the whole facial recognition thing. It can't see me. Or if it sees me, it's going to get me wrong and think that I'm I don't know, a Barack Obama. So it cannot, those systems consistently fail at recognizing people of color. Then the other thing she said, which was really interesting, it said that the carbon footprint that it takes to run these artificial intelligence program is basic, the artificial intelligence is heating the planet up. So she brought that to light, and Google said, you're out of here. But what she said, and I'm trying to tie this all back to just the cross. What she said was, the minute you start to stand up for marginalized people, they come for you. The minute you start to stand up for marginalized people, they come for you. The people in power come for you. So, about what?
Online about the Jim Crow laws.
The Jim Crow laws.
The same
Right.
idea.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, right. The nation has a history with Jim Crow. I mean, it's got, we got work to do. We got work to do. We got some real work to do. But so we're back to the woman who got stoned, or who they were about to stone. But Jesus brought grace to that situation. Jesus was not condemning her. As a matter of fact, what Jesus said was, well, if you're going to pull the rule book out, pull the rule book out on yourselves. And Jesus goes on to say, he who has no sin, throw the first stone. Pull the rule book out. See what page you're on. All right. And then we'll go from there. Any other comments or remarks or yes?
Same paragraph on page 19. And Jesus said, he who has ever sinned, throw the first stone. And they began to one by one to slip away, beginning with the oldest.
So Jan Smith
Why'd you do that to us?
Jan Smith's just making a comment that in the Bible it says after that, starting with the oldest, is they started to leave.
Yeah. And I think that's a caution to really don't get set in your ways. Be ready to evolve. Be ready to recognize when other people are saying, me too. Be ready to evolve and change, and make adjustments. I guess it's really beginning with the oldest. Don't get set in your ways.
I think also it talks to, I think as I've gotten older, I see more of, the really big picture of how I've sinned. And when you're young, it kind of, I think when I was young, I kind of was, go, and maybe not as circumspect about my life. Yes, I've had more time to sin more, says my husband.
Well, but consider yourself blessed if you're able to do that, because some people, it's kind of for safety's sake, stay in the same lane. It's like, oh, if I don't change lanes here, and just kind of keep my distance from the car in front of me, I'll be okay. Versus, maybe you might get there faster if you kind of consider an alternative route, or, move to the left lane and go ahead and pass. It's like, people, but having the freedom, to move kind of, through these boundaries that have been set up, and to really kind of recognize the boundaries as being somewhat not porous, I'm going to say. But yeah, consider yourself blessed that you're, free enough, to kind of make those moves. Now, one of the things that I may be bowling in somebody's lane here, but we'll see what happens. One of the things that the more fundamental types, the fundamentalists, generally had, and the sociology, religion folks will kind of bear this out. The more fundamental types, the people that keep the rules, need rules. They need rules because, they lived a life where there were no rules and anything could happen to them. So that's some of what's going on. I mean, it's never just one thing, but that's some of what's going on, with the rule, with the people that stay between the lines are our friends. They're not always our friends. Yeah, okay. All right, cool. So moving right along.
One thing I like about the story of how Jesus treated the woman was that he had actually, I believe he'd actually forgiven her before he even started talking. Now, this is an amazing thing to me about grace.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever had to try to get two people who were opposed to each other because something the other person had done, I've heard many times, I'm not going to forgive that person until they say I'm sorry or something like that. In this case, the woman never spoke at all. Somehow in Jesus' heart, he didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
See, that's a really important way to look at grace.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you can't put conditions on it. We
Right.
often do. We often say, well, I'm not gonna deal with that person until they acknowledge what they did. I don't hear anything from that woman in the story where she acknowledged what her condition was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Smith is saying that that Jesus forgave the woman before she even, well, she never said anything, and before he forgave her before anything happened really, and that it's contrary to what we sometimes hear from people is, I'm not going to forgive you until you admit that you did wrong, or I'm not going to forgive you till this or that, and that here Jesus forgave the woman before anything happened, before the whole conversation and situation unfolded.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll speak for myself. That's hard. You know, that is hard. You know, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's hard because we're kind of gnashing our, at least me anyway. I'm sitting around gnashing my teeth, going, and usually, if you're willing, again, I'll go back to that remark I made earlier. It's like trauma. Well, it starts with the word trauma, but it's trauma decontextualized without context is called personality. I'll change it to behavior without context, because a lot of times we're looking at behavior without a context. You know, you, I might be trying to walk up a hill, and somebody, a seasoned walker, might also be trying to walk up the hill. And the seasoned walker is getting up the hill before I am. And if they're turning around going, hurry up, you're not keeping up, they've neglected the context of the fact that I have 50 pounds I need to lose, a questionable knee, and a hip that's asking me questions. You get what I'm saying here? It's like hurry up, Walker, go faster. It's like, no, you got an extra 50 pounds, a knee and a hip, with some questions. But again, it's kind of like we need to forgive without context. We need to just kind of get to the top of the hill and wait. Just get there and wait. So moving right along. Anything from Zoom land? Okay. All righty. How are we with time? It's almost an hour and I'm still talking way more than I want to. And see, we've been, at least in graduate school. It wasn't true in the large lecture halls as an undergraduate. But we were encouraged to talk. We were encouraged to talk. So I'm gonna. That's my drum. That's the thing I'm gonna be beating. Talk, think, engage. Be willing to consider different points of view and different perspectives. And what time is it Bills playing today? Tomorrow night. Okay. Monday Night Football. Okay. Anything interesting today?
Don't know. They didn't tell which games we got in February.
Say what?
They didn't show on the paper exactly which games we're going to get, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. All righty. I'm with you, folks. I'm just, I just have some Sunday afternoon things. You may remember one Sunday I stood there and said, I miss sports. I miss.
Oh, that's a good point. So Mark's saying that he doesn't know what sports are on today because the paper didn't say exactly what we can get here in Rochester.
Oh,
So,
okay. All righty. So knowing that, having this mystery before us, would someone close us in prayer?
I guess I will. Dear Lord, we thank you for this time together to consider your unlimited grace, your your unconditional love for us that's going out ahead of us and catching us as we fall, helping us when we are trying to be brave, and forgiving us before we even ask. Lord, we thank you that we were able to learn more about Pastor Phil today and learn more of your will for us in
Yeah.
this life. And we just give you all the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Oh, man. See you. Have a great day.